In this lesson, we're going to talk about the indicators of climate change, and this has been adapted from Let's Talk Science's Clothing for Climate project. So first of all, what is climate change? So some of the questions that we need to think about would be, how do we know the climate is changing, and what's the difference between weather and climate? So again, this is an image from our Clothing for Climate resource. So climate change is a change in the usual pattern of weather in a region. So weather is the day-to-day change in temperature and rainfall in the place, and it can change very quickly. So you could actually see different weather patterns within the same day. So you could go from rain to snow to sleet to a tornado to sunny and so on. So weather can change. It's the day-to-day change in temperature and rainfall. Whereas climate is the usual weather conditions for an area over many years, and it changes a lot more slowly than weather. And the problem is that sometimes if you're not paying attention and you're not measuring the weather day by day over many years, you might not realize that the climate is changing if you're not being attentive enough. So Let's Talk Science used an analogy. So weather would be the example, kind of like what you wear every day, whereas climate is what you wear over the whole year. So the question is, how do we know that the climate is changing then? So we have to look for indicators of climate change. So the biggest one would be temperature changes, but seeing if the weather patterns are changing, is the sea ice melting, are the sea levels rising, or ecosystem changing, are all indicators of climate change. So the first thing is we measure temperature. And we have thousands of weather stations around the world, but the problem is we haven't been consistently measuring temperature for that long, only for about 100 years. So how do we go further back if we don't have that data? There's actually a few ways we can do that. So the first one is that scientists can take long cores of ice from glaciers and measure the layers. So just like tree rings, ice makes layers on the glaciers, and you can actually see the winter temperatures over the years from those ice layers. And scientists can actually predict the yearly temperatures this way going back about 800,000 years. So it is a very useful tool using ice cores. So you can see here in this image here, there's the ice core that this person has taken out, and you can see there's different layers. So some years there were lots of deposits of ice, and some years not as much. And again, carbon dioxide is trapped, and other gases are trapped in these ice cores. So we can actually measure what the climate was like in those years, over year by year. Climate scientists can also use tree ring data to predict the temperature patterns over the years. The thickness of the ring will tell us what the climate was like in each growing season. We can also take a look at the Earth's temperature. So this picture shows the changing temperatures of the Earth. This is showing compared to 1951 to 1980. We can see that if you're in the reds, then it's been at least a 7-degree increase in temperature. In the blues, there's less. So you can see that in some places it's actually a bit cooler from those times, but it's not very many places. But we can see that the major heating up parts are at the poles. So that's a problem because that's where our polar ice is. So if those ice caps melt, then that's going to lead into rising sea levels. So the sea ice we can look at too. So because the temperatures near the poles are rising much more quickly from that image, the sea ice is melting at a faster rate. So this was how much we had around the 1980s, and now this is more what we have right now. So definitely shrinking the amount of polar ice or sea ice. We can also look at rising sea levels. So we can see here that over the years, the sea levels have been rising dramatically, and melting ice causes the sea levels to rise at a much faster rate. And we can also look at changing ecosystems. So we can observe changes to ecosystems over the years to measure climate change as well. There is a climate short recommended by Let's Talk Science called The Elder's Perspective, and it's found on YouTube.